Thank you for tuning in to ACTAI Global's Fireside Chat with Louie Psihoyos. I'm Amanda Terry, your host and creator for this virtual Fireside Chat series. We're very excited to have him today. This is actually our 10th in the series that we've started since we all began sheltering at home. Louie is the executive director of the Oceanic Preservation Society, OPS, and he's widely regarded as one of the world's most prominent still photographers. He has circled the globe dozens of times for National Geographic and has shot hundreds of covers for other magazines, including Fortune, Smithsonian, Discover, Geo, Time, Newsweek, the New York Times, and Sports Illustrated. His first documentary film, The Cove, has won over 100 awards globally from festivals and critics, and became the first documentary in history to sweep all of the film guilds and win the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature in 2009. The activism around that film helped lead to an over 93% drop of dolphin and porpoise deaths. His second film, Racing Extinction, the day that it aired, is actually about the global extinction crisis, and was seen by over 36 million people in 220 countries and territories the first day it aired, and led to laws banning the trade of some of the world's most endangered species. His most recent film that he directed, The Game Changers, which you can see on Netflix, is also about super athletes that increase strength and endurance with their plant-based diets. And during its first month of release, searches for plant-based diet rose by 350% globally. The Game Changers was executive produced by James and Susie Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Kyle and Tracy Vogt, and Jackie Chan. And so with that, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on ACTAI and a few more minutes for people to join, and then we'll get started. For those of you who don't know who ACTAI Global is, we're a nonprofit and community of athletes, conservationists, technologists, artists, and innovators that bring our collective knowledge, energy, and social capital together in active gatherings. Obviously now we're doing those online instead of in person. Our community supports projects benefiting environmental conservation and economic empowerment via entrepreneurship. Together, we've brought it together to life, a marine conservation area with Mission Blue. We've also supported other conservation organizations such as Ocean Elders, Virgin Unite, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, Lonely Whale, and now we hope we're also going to be supporting Oceanic Preservation Society. ACTAI has also catalyzed gatherings around the world, including the Australia-based West Tech Fest, the Necker Blockchain Summit, and the Extreme Tech Challenge. ACTAI was also a partner in the formative stages of the 2030 Vision Project to bring technology and multi-stakeholder partnerships to solve for the 17 United Nations Sustainability Goals. All right, so let's get started. I think we've given people enough time to settle in. Just some quick housekeeping notes. Obviously for this virtual gathering, this fireside chat is being recorded, so anything that's in the chat box, people will be able to see on the webinar, but they won't be able to see on the final recording that we'll upload to YouTube and the ACTAI YouTube channel. Secondly, we would love to make this interactive and have you ask questions. So for those of you that are logged into the Zoom app, you'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you just click that button and submit your question, I'll put them to Louie live. And when you ask a question, if you provide your name, your company, or location, it's kind of fun. I can read those out as well. And if you're having any issues logging into Zoom, you can join us via the local phone number that was in your registration email. And if that is how you're joining us, you can also email us questions at fireside@actai.global. So now with all the housekeeping notes out of the way, hi Louie, how are you?
Good, Amanda. Good to see you again.
Yeah, where are you? It's a beautiful view.
San Francisco Bay, Sausalito, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Nice, nice. Well, first of all, I just want to say, thank you for all of the work that you've done to raise awareness and inspire action around a more humane and sustainable future through your nonprofit. It's really amazing throughout the years, all that you've done.
Well, thank you. But it really is about the team. It's about putting a team together to make it all happen. It's just I want to call me a figurehead, but I'm the leader of the group, but it's certainly rely on a lot of other people to make it all happen.
Great, and I look forward to hearing more about many of the different projects in the next hour. I guess maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about the founding of the Oceanic Preservation Society, and maybe a little bit about how it's evolved through the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's the roots of it. I think the origin story I think is quite interesting. I mean, how much time do we have, by the way? Because I can tell the sort of.
We've got 53 minutes. So
Okay, great. Well, I'll tell sort of a medium-sized story. Well, one of the guys that I was doing a story for National Geographic on the information revolution back, before just at the invention of the internet, and the guy that invented the first commercial internet browser was Jim Clark. One of these serial entrepreneurs that made, billions of dollars on, invented the first commercial internet browser. The day he invented the 3D graphics engines, which is the way that you could control, games and 3D CAD cams and on, live, on the computers. He invented the 3D graphics engine. He did WebMD. The day when I met him, he was working on Shutterfly, and I was photographing him for the cover of Fortune magazine. Later on, like 10 years later, like he couldn't be photographed. He was too busy when I was doing the story for National Geographic. 10 years later, I'm working for Fortune magazine, shooting covers of, people like Jim Clark, and he was building a boat with the world's tallest mast in the Netherlands. And he said, Louie, I'm working on this company, what's called Shutterfly. Could you teach me how to be a good photographer? And I said, Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great one if you teach me how to be a billionaire. And we went around the world for the next several years. He'd pick me up on his planes, and we'd go mostly diving underwater to do underwater shots. And he built the best underwater camera in the world for us. So we'd have sort of like a baseline of like what the oceans looked like before, this degradation. But every time we went back, we dive in the same dive site, and it would be wrecked. And it just kept on working like this. And then eventually we went to Papua New Guinea, and he dove on. He said, Louie, I want to take you to the best place I'd ever seen. It was rubble when we got on. It took like a couple of days to fly there and to sail there. And we were in the Galapagos right after that. And we saw fishermen illegally fishing in a marine sanctuary when we came up from the dive. And he said, man, somebody should do something about this. And I said, how about you and I? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, we'll use your money, my eye, and we'll make films. And, I was just feeling like, okay, what have I done? I got myself into a big mess, but I feel like this is something I really wanted to do, but I had no experience at all in film, like zero. And we're on his boat for Christmas down in the Caribbean, and my kid starts playing on the beach with another kid. It happens to be Steven Spielberg's kids. And Steven had made Jurassic Park using Jim's computer, Silicon Graphics. And Steven Spielberg came over to the boat to meet Jim and, the father of his son's new friend. And I said, Mr. Spielberg, do you have any advice for a first-time filmmaker? He says, yeah, never make a movie involving boats or animals. And then the first film we went out and made, that Jim and I went out and made, was The Cove. And The Cove, like you said at the intro, became the most winning documentary in history. So when people say, do you have any advice for a first-time filmmaker? I said, yeah, don't listen to advice. But that was kind of the origins of the film. And, the Cove, to people who haven't seen it, is about dolphin hunting in Japan. They were actually eating them there. They still do a little bit, but it's, like you said, it's down about 93% since the film came out. And that's when I really saw that film is a powerful weapon. I think it's the most powerful weapon we have for social change. You just have to, it's not good enough to make a film that just gives people information. You have to use it as a wedge to influence culture. And what I mean by that is, like, The Cove, we didn't just say, okay, well, let's make a film about dolphin. We were going to make it a traditional way, like, get their point of view and our point of view, or, another point of view. And they didn't want to talk. Nobody wanted to talk about dolphin hunting that were involved in it. The mayor of the town, the Japanese Ministry of Fisheries, they didn't really want to talk about it. And then we used a technique in Japan. It's called gaiatsu. It's called outside pressure to create inside pressure for change. That's what's most of the major changes that have happened culturally in Japan have happened because of that. So that's what we used. We just exposed what was happening over there, And quite honestly, we just had to shame them with the truth. So that's when we realized that films can be a really, really strong weapon for cultural change. That's why we did Racing Extinction, this film that tackles on the sixth mass extinction on the planet. There's a, it's a beautiful day out here at the ocean, but, it's a veneer. If you jump in the ocean, there's a beach down here. It's full of plastic, not just like plastic bags, but like microplastics that were heating up the oceans. The reefs that Jim and I were documenting are disappearing for acidification, warming. We've lost about 75% of the Great Barrier Reef in just the last 3 years, through warming. So we're seeing the degradation of the environment going on before our eyes, even though on the surface it looks very much like it did, millions of years ago if you go out to these sort of natural places. So the idea behind OPS is to use films to inspire massive shifts of culture change, using film as a tool, as a weapon. And the way that, the reason that we, if you look at the first two films of environmental films, you think, well, why do you do one on food? Well, food is at the nexus of everything that I care about, human health. 80 to 85% of the diseases that we have are actually reversible by diet and lifestyle. The eating of meat is probably, it's the biggest cause of freshwater pollution, one of the biggest causes of greenhouse gases. It's responsible for, like I said, 80 to 85% of our chronic health problems, heart disease, diabetes, a lot of cancers, and Alzheimer's. It looks like it's too early to say right now. I'm doing another film on reversing Alzheimer's. It's never been done before with drugs, but a doctor just right down the street from me in Sausalito, Dr. Dean Ornish, is working on a project, a study to see if he can reverse it with Alzheimer's. And I might be talking out of turn a little bit too early, but at least in the first 3 cohorts, it looks like it's working on 70% of the first of early stage patients of Alzheimer's. It's not going to it might not reverse it because you get too far removed, but people spent billions and billions of dollars of drugs and decades trying to solve this problem, and it's food. And the raising of meat for human consumption is the biggest cause of species extinction, habitat destruction. It's like at the list. So if you want to change the world, we have to change what's on people's plate. Start shifting from animal-based agriculture to more vegetarian or a vegan lifestyle. It's it's a way to save your own health, save the planet's health, and you'll live on average about 10 years longer. Amanda, I don't know how older you are, but like when, the young people, you say you can live 10 years longer. When you're 20, 25, you think you're immortal anyway. You think you're going to live forever, but you start getting to my age. It's like, you want to do stuff that's not going to happen to you like that happened to our parents. You don't want to be doing drugs to thin your cholesterol, thin your blood, and to keep your heart rate down, and to try to keep your diabetes in check. You can do a lot of that just by eating well. So food, that's why we did the Game Changers. The Game Changers is and by the way, it wasn't just like, plants are better than animals. It's like we looked at the data and looked at, okay, why is this diet stunted at like 3 to 5% of the population stuck at veganism or vegetarianism? And we found out that males are really marketed to very heavily to believe to be big and strong and healthy and have virility, that you have to have meat, animal products. That's everywhere you see it. And that myth is the biggest lie that everybody has ever been told. It's because to be strong and healthy and have virility, plants are the best way to go, bar none. Cut out the middleman, cut out the animals. And so in that film, we looked at, before we started, we said, well, what's going to get people to shift and men to shift, because they're the real impediment to this. Women will, if you go out to eat, Amanda, and I don't know, maybe I'm generalizing too much, but if a group of women go out to eat and you have a quinoa salad, or you're eating something that looks pretty healthy, you get patted on the back. It's like, hey, good for you. Maybe I'll have that. A guy goes out and eats like that, we get shit. Veggies are supposed to be for weaklings. So we took one of the world's strongest guys, Patrick Baboumian, and had him carry more weight further than anybody that has ever done in history. He did it on a vegan diet. He got bigger and stronger, by the way, when he switched to veggies. Scott Jurek, probably the most accomplished ultra runner in the world. We were with him when he ran the Appalachian Trail, 2,200 miles. You know, most people take some like 6-8 months to do it. He did it in 46 days. And, you know, he ran the Appalachian Trail. That's like 2 marathons a day of, on average, 11,000 feet of ascent and descent every day. So the guy's a complete animal, and he does it on a vegan diet. And we do this wonderful study, and it's not a clinical study. We only did it with a few collegiate athletes that were really healthy. We did a study to basically measure their virility, how strong their erections are with a plant-based diet compared to a meat-based diet. And you know, this is the mic drop moment. We probably we didn't have to do the whole movie. We probably just could have reduced it to a 3-minute YouTube. So we gave him this, you know, there's something called a Rigiscan that measures like nocturnal erections on a man. A guy will have about 6 to 7 erections that are normal throughout the night, just a part of the way your body keeps your male healthy, and it has nothing to do with, like, you know, sexual dreams or whatever. And so we put this Rigiscan, or they put this Rigiscan on themselves. It's basically a computer that goes on their leg, and it's attached to these 2 diodes. One goes to the base of the penis, and one goes to the head of their penis, and it measures nocturnal erections. And on average, with a plant-based diet, they had 350% harder, longer erections, and a 10.4% larger erection on a plant-based diet. So that was the mic drop moment. We probably didn't have to do the rest of the film because of that. But so that film has just been sweeping through the planet like a firestorm. You know, it's just it's incredible to see you know, I went to Australia. This is right at the very beginning of the pandemic, before we knew that it was going to be an issue. This is in early February, and it was really difficult. I spent 2 days. It was almost impossible to find somebody that hadn't seen the film. You know, the bellboys, you know, restaurants had special vegan menus. One guy I used to work with at the UN, he hadn't seen the film, but he says, you know, I've got to see your film, because if I have a dinner party at my house, nobody's going to come unless it's vegan. So I know the film's been, you know, anecdotally doing incredibly well. And like you said, on Google searches, it's, you know, in the first 30 days, it went up 350%. And on the first 9 days it was on iTunes, it was the most successful documentary or independent film in their history.
Great. Yeah, I think you covered a lot of ground and what we were going to chat about. But, you know, I can roll, you know, one of the trailers, or just kind of get into some of the questions a little bit more. Like, I know you said there's 50 million viewers of the Cove since 2009. And I don't know, at least anyone who follows the ACTAI social media, I posted about some of your ops projections. I think you had like 160 species on the Empire State Building, and also St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican. I guess just taking a step back, like, you know, what is your most proud accomplishment as, you know, co-founder and executive director of ops? Because you've done everything from films to projections, kind of illuminating some of these issues.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess to explain the projections, it helps to understand a little bit of the premise of social change, and why we try to do things the way we do, and why, if you want to scale things, you know, really have, you know, a cultural event become a social event, you have to understand the mechanics of how social change works. And there's some really great studies. If somebody wants to Google it, it's called Minority Rules, and it's the studies determine that you need 10% of the population to be 100% committed to an idea. And they used the models that they used were like the suffragette movement, you know, women being allowed to vote, the civil rights movement, Arab Spring. They ran clinical tests in laboratory situations. Once 10% of the population is 100% convinced of the truth, then everything just takes off like wildfire. That it's 100% adaptation happens very quickly. We talked about this the other day, Amanda. If you look at, you know, technological innovations, it happened like with the car. If you look at the Easter Parade in Manhattan in 1900, it was a famous picture that was taken from looking down on, you know, Broadway during the Easter Parade. It was all horses, you know, just a sea of horses all up and down the North-South Avenue, except for one car. And you can imagine what everybody in the horse was thinking. You know, what was that crazy fool Who's that wacko? And then, 13 years later, the 1913 Easter parade is completely reversed. It's like all cars find the horse. And, technological innovations usually take about a decade. And that happened with the cell phone as well. 12 years ago, when, right at the invention of the iPhone, we were hitting the number 2 key 6 times to text a capital C. That's how primitive we were. And it just feels like it's yesterday. Well, that said, so what we wanted to do for Racing Extinction is alert the world that there's this extinction going on and try to get people to start to do something about it. And we knew that to get 10% of the population of the world to see a film is really almost impossible these days, because of a lot of barriers. So, but we did really well. Like you mentioned, we had 36 million people see the film in 220 countries and territories the first day. And, probably a couple 100 million people saw that, but we knew it wouldn't be enough. So we knew we had to do something in addition to that would be big and audacious. And I had this idea that let's light up the Empire State Building with endangered species. It had never been done before. Nobody had ever illuminated the Empire State Building like that. And people still do it in Times Square, but Times Square is just noisy. It's too bright. There's too many other ads. Even if you take it over, if there's 500 billboards, if you get half of them, it still looks like, it doesn't look like anything. And people, I had this idea for 4 years. I was trying to get, Mayor Bloomberg to do this, and we had obstacles. The producers of the film were like, Louie, that's crazy. It's gonna be too expensive. And then one of our distributors said, well, listen, you're trying to do this on a Saturday night in New York in the summer. The chances of it, being successful are almost nil, because all the important people that are decision makers they're going to be out at the Hamptons or over in Europe. And the press, because it gets dark later in the summer, the news outlets won't pay overtime to have news crews there. So it'll be a non-event, even if you can pull it off. So for 4 years, I heard this rhetoric. And anyway, eventually I would ask everybody I knew that, could you help me on this? And right before COP21, I was at Norman and Lynn Lear's house. He's one of the most successful producers in Hollywood. He helped, he had 5 of the top 10 programs on, and during when I was a kid growing up, All in the Family and Maude and The Jeffersons, and he did one of my favorite movies of all time, Princess Bride. I was at his house. Well, we couldn't get the Cove sold after Sundance, and Lynn Lear was on the board of Sundance, and she said, well, why don't you come and show it at the Cove at our house? We have some people that might be able to help. And there's like 30 people in their living room, and it's like the who's who of Hollywood. And Jeff Skoll was there, the head of participant. I think he started, I can't, you have to help me out, I think PayPal, but he's like, some multi-billionaire. And he turned to Michael Burns, the COO of Lionsgate, and said, I'll do the impact campaign if you distribute the film. And right there in their living room, the rest was history. And then, so 5 years later, I'm in that same living room, but now instead of trying to sell that movie, I run this, I'm the executive director, like you said, at the Oceanic Preservation Society. There's 50 of the top NGOs in the country there. And we're there with Ban Ki-moon, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, his group trying to promote COP21. And so there's the head of the Sierra Club, World Wildlife Federation, Oceana, and then me. And Lynn Lear asked me to stand up and talk about Racing Extinction, the film that we just did. And she said, would you talk about your film? I said, well, last time we were in this living room, I wanted to, get our film sold. We've already sold the film. What I've been trying to do for the last 4 years is light up the Empire State Building, but I can't get, the mayor to agree to this. Does anybody know Bill de Blasio, who took over from Bloomberg? And Norman Lear's over in the corner of the room, and he says, I know Bill. He literally flew to New York the next day. And this is like on a Sunday night, and on a Tuesday morning, I get an email in my message box from Bill de Blasio, the mayor, saying, how do we make this happen? So we made this happen, and we had, you're talking about the most exciting moment in my career. So 4 years of trying to get this to happen. We light up the Empire State Building, and we stopped, Fifth Avenue, like it was the Easter parade. It was like people on cars and roofs, taxi cabs, stopped in the middle of the street with fares, people just looking up at the, in wonderment at all these beautiful creatures that they'd never see in New York, and people crying and laughing and looking in silence. It was just beautiful to stop New York City in its tracks. And it was the top trending story on Facebook and Twitter for 4 days worldwide. By Thursday, we had 939 million media views, and we hit it out of the park. People started talking about, a mass extinction. So that made me feel like, okay, it's okay to be nuts, Steve Jobs says it's the crazy ones. They're the ones that they're so stupid that they think they can change the world, and they're the only ones that actually do it. And I thought we couldn't get any more attention to the issue than that. And then the Pope called, and the Pope wanted us to light up the Vatican with endangered species during COP21. And we had remember the Pope, St. Francis, he named himself after St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of animals. And so he wanted to remind world leaders while they were deciding whether COP21 should go forward, if that treaty should get ratified, that there's more at stake than just people, that there's the whole animal kingdom, insect kingdom, everything's relying on the decisions people make. And we lit up the Vatican during COP21, and we had, I can't remember, it's like 4.5 billion media views in the English language. There's 600 major television and news outlets there. And remember, everybody in the world now has one of these, and they're sitting at St. Peter's Square, and they're taking pictures, and they become a automatic broadcaster. And each person has maybe 1,000, 2,000 people in their network, and all those people have 1,000, and it just lit up the internet like crazy. And now people know there's a mass extinction going on. So but here's the thing: it's one thing to feel proud to help ignite a movement, but what we're really trying to do is create change. It's not about me. It's not about the awareness. It's about, what do you do? What's the action that you can create after that to move things forward? Because I always look at things like, when you're on, I can't remember how it was. I remember reading an article about somebody that was probably about my age when I was in my 20s, or my teens, or early late teens, and he said, well, when you're on your deathbed, you don't want to look back and think about all the coulda, woulda, shouldas. So I think I've been living my life like that, with these sort of long-term goals of like how I want to leave the world a better place. So we do films, and I feel like that's kind of my, that is my calling. That's why I feel like I'm using all these gifts, if I have them, to try to create the social change that I'm seeing. I think that the world's a crazy place right now. It's we're nuts. We're off kilter, and I think making films and doing projection events is one way to set this ship that's going aground a little bit more on course.
Yeah, great. And I want to take we've been getting a few questions here coming in. So this is from Bob Vandegrond, and he said, through your documentaries, you probably made a lot of enemies. Like I know in Cove, you had a lot of secret cameras that you guys were wearing. How do you make sure that your documentaries don't get shut down, like Michael Moore's most recent film has been? And how do you handle rights issues of people and companies that don't want to be filmed or exposed?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, in fact, we did get shut down in Japan. That we were supposed to be in, I can't remember now, like 26 or 29 theaters. And these, the right-wing nationalists in Japan, they have these big black, gray shout trucks, they're called. They have speakers on, and they'll, like, in front of the theaters, they'll start saying, this is, American propaganda. They're trying to, this is culinary imperialism. They're trying to tell us what to eat. And in fact, we were only in about 6 or 7 theaters. But however, it's a little bit like jujitsu, I guess, where you take the whatever's thrown at you, and you try to reverse that, right? You try to use their momentum. So like when they started to shut us down, a lot of artists in Japan said, what is it about our culture? They actually got behind us. They wrote letters to the editors, and they became very vocal and said, what is it about our culture that we can't see ourselves the way other people see us? Why can't we just allow this movie to be seen in our own culture? And that started another wave the shout trucks went in front of our distributor's house, and he wasn't home, but his wife and kids were. And so they were shouting, they burst through the front door. This was captured on CNN. They got scared, they ran out the back door. This is all being recorded, and that became international news. So the propaganda against us, you just try to turn them. So we would just use whatever we were thrown and try to get it back to them. So we created even more noise. There was a great film about the captive dolphin industry that came out a couple years after us called Blackfish. And I saw it at Sundance when it premiered, and I told I went up on, after the movie was done, I went and talked to the makers of the film and the distributor. I said, would be the best thing that ever happened to you? I said, what do you mean? I said, well, we have at that point, we only had 600,000 people but there were 600,000 people. They're ravenous about trying to solve this issue of trying to stop cetaceans from being used for entertainment. And we banded with other groups to prevent, like at SeaWorld, there was about 12 groups like Bare Naked Ladies, Willie Nelson, that were all doing this sort of summer festival, like Beers and Brews festival. And we got Bare Naked Ladies to stop, by doing petitions. And then Willie Nelson, and then eventually, I think either 10 out of 12 or 11 out of 12 of the performers stopped singing there. And it wasn't just that act, it was that this became news every time it happened. And then SeaWorld's stock crashed, they lost half their value that the next earnings report. Oh, this is another thing we did. We sent a copy of the Cove and Blackfish to everybody that sat on the board of directors of the 10 major investment firms of SeaWorld. And that, coupled with a law that was being introduced here in California, caused the stock to crash about 50% in one day. We sent copies of the Cove and Blackfish to every Japanese person that sat on a Japanese consulate and embassy. We sent 2 suitcases full of DVDs in Japanese of the Cove to the town of Taiji, where they were killing more dolphins than any other place on the planet. We knew that, maybe if just a couple people saw it, it would start that conversation. And once you get to that 10% number, like I said, it's unstoppable. Oh, by the way, when the lead author of that study, I looked at the study, and there's 3 pages of algorithms. And I said, well, when you sent me the paper, and I said, can you explain, the algorithms to me, like how you come up with this 10% number, and in lay language, because I'm not a mathematician. So he said, oh yeah, he says, it's like if you're trying to create steam, you can't do it unless you get water to a boiling point. He said 10% of the population, 100% committed to social change, is the boiling point for social change. So that's why the 10% number is so crucial. He said it's like you can heat up water at 200 degrees forever, and you'll never get it to boil. But that's why that 10% number, that's why the projections are important. That's why doing films are important. That's why it's all about the awareness and getting to that 10% number. Once you do that, boom, the world's a different place.
Amazing. And on that, maybe you want to talk about one movie or two, but kind of the impacts of the films, like maybe Racing Extinction, or your newest film, The Game Changers. You could talk a little bit about what have you seen, now that it's been out?
Oh boy. I mean, so much stuff is anecdotal, but what we've done here in America is there was some loopholes that allowed some of the most endangered species to come into America, so that a ship out here in the bay, it could take a species that might be banned in California, but as long as they didn't open up that trailer, it could take it to Oklahoma or Texas, where it isn't banned. So there's these loopholes, and we knew at a federal level it was going to be difficult to do. So we worked on the state level. So we created a West Coast firewall to prevent, by a legal firewall with referendums. Fortunately, the same election that got us our current administration, we also worked with Oregon, Washington State, California, and Hawaii to ban some of the most endangered species, depending on the state, 10 to 12 of the most endangered species from coming into ports in America. That's one thing that's happened. if you look at the Extinction Rebellion, a lot of the people that are members and founders of that got their roots in, by being alerted to what was going on from the projections or seeing the film Racing Extinction. It's certainly a lot of activists that point to that as them, getting radicalized in a good way to get fired up about doing something. Yeah, it's like, the numbers, with Game Changers, the problem with Netflix, and I'm just going to probably be doing another film with another series that they just greenlighted with Netflix. They won't give us numbers for a lot of their own internal reasons of how good a film's doing. But we knew that the Game Changers was one of the most watched. Is that me? The fire? Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
They're coming to get me.
It's not a screensaver. Screensaver the day in the background. It's live.
Yeah. Yeah, my girlfriend works in sound, and she's sheltered in place working on sound over in the next room. So I've been banished to the deck. Yeah, when you start to look at the Game Changers, I mean, okay, just look at one person becoming vegan, and we know millions, probably tens of millions of people have become vegan or vegetarian after seeing that one film. Just one person becomes vegan. The stats are that the difference between a vegan and a meat eater, you save about 3.5 tons of carbon dioxide a year. Carbon dioxide that's not going and screwing up the oceans or the atmosphere. They save, an average person eats about 10,000 animals in their lifetime. If you get somebody that's like 40 years old, you save 5,000 animals. 5,000 animals from a life of suffering. The difference between a vegan and a meat eater, a meat eater uses about 401,000 gallons of water per year extra. That's like going to get polluted. It's about 9,000 square feet of land, more land that's used to raise animals and plants. And then you start doing the math on that, multiplying it times 1 million or 10 million. I mean, literally, you're saving hundreds of millions of animals, and you're saving, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of hectares of land. This is just, one film having this effect, and the downstream effect of that going around the world is incredible. And you can't do that. I'm not sure. It looks like the fire is pretty close here. Anyway, you can hear me over that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of along those, I know yesterday we were talking, you said kind of the sixth max, we're in the middle of the sixth max extinction. Right. Mass extinction. And it all has to do with carbon dioxide levels kind of spiking. Can you talk a little bit, you mentioned also that you're working on another film related to that, and also kind of micro plastics and polluting. Can you talk a little bit about
well, to be clear, there's like 4 drivers of extinction. It's overconsumption, pollution, there's habitat destruction, there's several of them, but 4 major drivers of extinction. But yeah, we're working on about a half a dozen films right now. We're working on a food series for Netflix. Fingers crossed, we just got greenlit for the proposal a couple days ago. We're doing a film on the Fermi paradox and the Great Filter. This is the reasons for humanity to become an interplanetary species. So that's talks about all the things that could take our planet out. In December, there was a comet that came about a fifth of the distance between the moon and the Earth. So it's like 20,000 miles away. It's going 44,000 miles an hour. It's a city killer. There's a lot of things that could take us out. Overpopulation. Another pandemic that could be a lot more deadly than the current one. That's the other thing about food. I mean, it's like that's the new food series will talk about the pandemics. Three quarters of the pandemics that we've had, the swine flus, the bird flus, the coronaviruses are caused by people eating animals. Somebody cannibalized a chimpanzee that got us AIDS and Ebola. Somebody I've been to the markets in China. We open up and one of the scenes that we have in Racing Extinction, where we went to the market that caused SARS, back in 2002, 2003. They're selling bats there for human consumption. They eat bats. There's something called zhenbu in Chinese culture, where traditional Chinese medicine, where they eat the animals that you they think that like a bat can see at night, so you eat a bat to improve your night vision or glaucoma. So we're doing a film on, called Food 2.0. It's a series on plant-based eating, the virtues of it, things that we couldn't talk about in the Game Changers, about, what I talked about, like the blue zones where people can live longer on a plant-based diet. We're doing a film on, we're developing a film on plastic pollution, trying to be more solutions oriented more than, here's the problems. I think we've all seen the films and the footage of the horrible things that happen with plastics in the oceans and other places, but we're trying to figure out a positive spin. It's really a design problem. When people did plastics to begin with, they never thought about the processes that it took to make it, and then what happens to it after it's done, after they build it. So it's a design problem. Nothing wrong with plastics per se. It's our use of it, the way that we use it. So we're trying to think of it more solutions based. I'm doing a film with the Dali Lama and Desmond Tutu, based on a book that they did called The Book of Joy. We have about 15 hours of footage of two of the greatest spiritual leaders of our generation talking about what it means to be human. And I saw the footage is it's just breathtaking how, I wish I had seen this film that we're going to make when I was in my 20s or early. So it's like a reset, because, and the stuff instinctually, but when people can put it into context, when they can frame it like these two leaders do, it was so, I don't know, it just made me feel delighted, because here we spend our lives searching for happiness. It's in our Constitution, right? The pursuit of happiness. Well, happiness isn't what makes us happy. Joy does. Happiness is like, these sort of short-term things. Once you get them, once you have the money, once you have the power, once you have, the sex with the person you want to have, once you have these things it's about happiness, it doesn't give you joy. It doesn't get you up in the morning and make you feel great. If you ever get like that paycheck or that job, or that, you're with that person, and it's not centered around joy, and I have to define what joy is, it leaves you empty. You get there and you think, oh, is that all there is? But joy is the only thing that'll give us joy, is when we're actually helping other people. It makes you, it makes you feel good, almost more than the person you're helping, because we're hardwired for joy. We're hardwired to help other people. And if you're not pursuing something that makes you, that you're not pursuing joy, you're kind of lost. It kind of, like when I was at Geographic, I started out doing the stories that I wanted to do. And then they said, oh, this guy first story I did was on garbage. And I made garbage look good. It was the most popular story of the year. And they said, oh, the kid can make garbage look good. Let's have him do these other things. And I was so happy. I was the first person that National Geographic hired in 10 years. But I started doing stories that I didn't really love. And I got off the joy train. And it was only until I started making films like I'm doing now that I felt like, oh, this is what I wanted to do back when I was a kid. I just sort of, I wasn't, I didn't frame it well enough. The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu sort of framed it so I could understand why my life made so much more sense now than it did when it was my 20s. Boy, we're also doing a film on four big wave female big wave surfers that won parity in the sport of big wave surfing. It's really a women's empowerment film. They won the rights to get their own heat at Mavericks, which is a big wave down the coast from here. It's a killer wave. I was on it. I was on that wave. I'm not a surfer. I'm really not a surfer. I broke my arm body surfing and it fell off. I need 4 surgeries to get it back on. I've got a lot of respect for anybody that can fearlessly go into these waves. But these women are just amazing. And so, we're almost all the films I'm talking about are funded. That one is not. For some reason, people see us as like, oh, they're environmental people, or the food people now, but they don't see us as doing like social change. So if there's anybody out there that wants to get behind, these films, and all of our films have won Oscars, but not nominated for Oscars or Emmys. It's all about social change. We don't do films just to do films. An average Hollywood producer, it's about butts and seats, $10 in a box of popcorn. That's what they see us as. We're just dollars. It's a box office thing. Of course, not now, but it's like, how much money does the film make? That's a barometer of success. Our barometer of success is like, how different our people when they get out of the film? How much can you change things so you can get that boat righted right? So that's why we do films. And we're doing another film on, I think this is where I met you first, Amanda, on the Leuser ecosystem. The film is called, it's an ecosystem in northwestern Sumatra. We call it, the film's called The Last Place on Earth, because it's the last place where wild orangutans, tigers, and elephants are in the wild together. And it's being decimated by illegal palm oil plantations. But the good news is we're following these 4 activists that are actually reversing things there. So what we want to do is celebrate the organizations like RAN, Rainforest Action Network, that are doing with these little tight organizations and these people that are working in the ecosystem to turn things around there. It's a really hopeful story, because it's like the Garden of Eden, or it's the last place on earth where these animals can be together in the wild. And the solutions are simple, but we have to celebrate and support the people that are actually doing it. So we're going to this unknown territory. Most people have never heard of the Leuser, but it's one of the prettiest places in the world. And we're talking about, trying to support the people that are doing this kind of work. Boy, what else are we doing? We're doing, we got a lot of great projects, and I love what we're doing. I just can't wait. When I go to bed at night, I just can't wait to wake up in the morning to start it all again. And it's not just about me. I'm not directing all these films. I'm directing like 3 of them, but it's about supporting the people that have the same vision that we do. That you want to have, we only work with people that are lit up. They're good at what they do. They're great at what they do, but they want to use their talents for social change.
Great. Yeah, super inspirational. I can't wait to see some of these films come out.
Me too.
Get funded and come out. So I guess, just changing gears a little bit, this is a question from James McDonough. What mistakes do rookie storytellers make, and kind of what sets the pros apart?
Well, okay. Well, I put them in different categories. Like there's any number of great films out there that can make money or shine a light on a dark subject, but the question is, how do you get people to change? That's a bigger question. A better question, I think, is like, how do you create action out of that? And that takes thought. And everything that we do requires not just how do you make a great film, but what's the action that you want to come out of it? How do you create that? So there's a difference between a good film and an effective film. You understand the difference, the framing of it? So like you might say, oh, I want to make a film about the Leuser ecosystem, and it's being decimated by these horrible American corporations, the Pepsi Corporation, Frito-Lay's, blah blah blah, snack foods. It's like, that's not going to get people to change. You have to figure out, how do you leverage that so that you're telling part of that story, but that's not the story. It's for people, right now we have compassion fatigue. Like, we're just inundated with bad news. You have to turn and I also understand that we want to sell, that's going on, and we have to figure out a way to talk to people differently than maybe we did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was like, oh, let's just make a film about, we'll just create awareness, give people the information, they'll decide. But like, no, we're running out of time. We don't have the bandwidth or the energy to just sort of create, give people the information, have them make it. I think we have to direct people towards, once you're in the steering wheel of your life, where do you want to take that? And so we, if to kind of the answer to the other person's question before is like, you have enemies. Well, we're kind of our worst enemies, ourselves, right? If you're not directing your life towards doing something positive to helping other people, then we're kind of the problem, and in that we're not pursuing ourselves what we're hardwired to do. So that once we start eating better and thinking about other people instead of ourselves, magically our whole life changes. Everything around us gets better. This is an odd thing to talk about, but I think it's true that everybody I know that's successful, once they find that they're on this path I'm talking about, like the universe supports you. It's like, people say, well, I would do what you're doing, or I'd do something that I want to do, but I don't have the money to do it. And that kind of thinking it's true. Everybody has the same issues, that they don't want to give up something. But once you start going towards it, it's funny how how many things support you on that trip. You know, that the money, first of all, becomes less important because you're doing something that makes you feel good. And you're attracting the people that you need to attract to help support you because they want to be there too. So once you start going that direction, the universe has this sort of internal mechanism that I don't think that we can see it, that it does support you because that's what we're hardwired to do. That's what people
Hey,
want to
Louie,
do.
I have to say one thing, you know, the values of the ACTAI community, you're basically articulating them without articulating them very specifically. They are three things. One is stand for something greater than yourself. The other is leave people and places better off after interacting. And the third is use your power to empower others.
Yeah,
And
well,
it's amazing because you are living that life and reflecting what makes our whole organization tick. It's remarkable. Thank you for that. Anyway,
oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, so these truths are are probably self-evident once you're on that path. But I'm just trying to give people that idea that things can happen for good that you couldn't anticipate. But I'm here to tell you, and you're here to say it, that it's the way forward, right? I mean,
I totally agree. It's like it takes a lifetime to kind of figure out that that's what makes the world work. And then if you just let go and go with it, it all starts to happen. And you don't really have to do anything.
Exactly.
Sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
No,
Amanda,
that's all
you
right.
probably have questions, Amanda.
Great. No, yeah, another question. This is from Daniel Lafferty from Vancouver. He's asking if a goal is that we want to engage 10% of the population to take action on climate change, do you think the best driver for change is educating people on the cause and solutions for climate change, or more focusing on some of the effects of climate change, or possibly both? But basically the question is, you know, and another person asked, you know, how do we get to the first 10%?
Yeah, I think the solution should be something in it for people. One thing should be something in it for the person that's trying to make the change. You know, when you try to say, hey, say, you know, when you fire up your SUV, you're affecting the habitat of polar bears. People aren't, you know, they're not going to change their behavior based on polar bears. You know, as much as I might care about nature and what's going up in the Arctic, that's not going to move the needle. You have to give people solutions that are actually upgrades. You know, it's reframing things. You know, if you looked at, you know, Tesla is a good example. You know, I didn't have a Tesla. I couldn't afford it at the time, but you know, I had one of the first electric cars in Colorado, and it was a Toyota RAV, and it was a fully electric one. And I was crazy. This is probably 2006. And it was charged up with solar panels. And I had, you know, I was a lunatic. There's two other electric cars in the state of Colorado that I knew of. And it was nuts. And it's a little bit like the electric cars were a little bit like, you know, the horse and buggy I talked about earlier, right? And those, it's a better technology. And it's, you know, we're at that juncture now where they're going to be, pretty soon they're going to be cheaper than, you know, than the gasoline cars. It's an upgrade. The car, if you ever hopped in a Tesla, you know, I know it's expensive. I don't have one. I'm still driving a Prius and electric cars. I'm in an apartment now, you know, so I can't get the owners here to get a charger. But it's an upgrade. The car is an upgrade. If you hop in it, you know, we took a Tesla. In racing Extinction, we turned it into like a Bond car. It's the first car in the world to have an electroluminescent paint job. We had a forward-looking infrared camera, a FLIR camera that could come out of the front and see carbon dioxide in real time. We had a 20,000 lumen projector in the back on a robotic arm, so we could put these images on skyscrapers. When we drove that car off the lot, our getaway driver that we had drive that was Leilani Munter. She's a race car driver, like a NASCAR driver. And we drove it off the lot down here at Fremont. And she looked at me and she said, every other car on the road just became a relic. And this is a person who drives cars at like 200 miles an hour. And, you know, but the point is the car is an upgrade. You know, you don't say, hey, listen, you should pay more for it because it's good for the environment. Elon doesn't you know, really advertise it as like the, you know, the carbon dioxide saver. It's just a better car. And, you know, when we talk about you know, in Game Changers, we rarely talk about, the only person that talks about animal rights in the Game Changers is this guy, Damian Mander. He's the head of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. And he's a big, strapping dude. He's on he's the equivalent of the Navy SEAL, but in Australia. He has search and destroy tattooed across his chest. He, like, you know, he's like a, you know, like a guy's guy. He's a killer. He trains people to kill. And he's, you know, after, in the end of the movie, you know, he says, he delivers the message, our only sort of anti, you know, eating animal message in the film in terms of animal rights. He says, you know, it had this flexible morality that allowed me to eat cows because cows weren't endangered, but I realized that I was, you know, full of shit. It had this flexible morality that allowed me to think this way. And so if we went in to make this movie and talked about animal rights, we would have alienated everybody watching the film, because they don't want to see that. The film is, the solutions are upgrades to people's lives. And so I would say it's a, you know, a long-winded way of saying to the person that's talking about climate change, figure out what the upside to this is. And this is, by the way, is what I learned from the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, is you take every negative situation that you have and see the positive in it. And that's, you know, so if you, the one of the producers of the film, he helped the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu write the Book of Joy with him. And he said he didn't want to really learn about joy from Desmond Tutu. He knew this guy was like epitomizes forgiveness and compassion. He wanted to drive with him in rush hour traffic and see how Desmond Tutu, you know, handled traffic. And so he said he was driving in Miami with him, with Desmond Tutu, and somebody cuts Desmond Tutu off, and he's like, he gets scared and slams on the brakes, and he says, okay, tell me what you were thinking right now. And he said, well, my first reaction was a little bit of anger, but I was really scared for myself. And then I put myself in the place of that driver. They must be really uncomfortable with their life, or they need to get somewhere. Maybe they're taking their wife to a hospital, whatever. You know, he went right to trying to emotionally think of where that person was at, rather than his own anger. And after I heard that story, I noticed that, you know, my ability, you know, like my first, you know, road rage is like, I'm gonna go cut him off and show him what he did to me. Instead, you know, thinking the way the other person thinks, and doesn't mean it has to be a judgment call. Just realize that they're not where you are, that you can remove yourself from the situation by thinking about them instead of yourself, which is, you know, one of the key components to getting along in the world anyway.
Great. I know we're just coming up to the top of the hour. I think we can go over just a few minutes and then I'll try to close. We've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of comments, people saying, you know, very inspirational talk. And I guess, you know, in kind of closing, I mean, what advice do you have? And this is kind of tagging on Mia Haggerty's question, but, you know, what are some first action steps to kind of align with this life that both you and Bill are talking about, which sounds like very value-based, helping other people? And any advice for people, I guess, one, for people that want to start going down that path, and then maybe also just something tangible for these films that you're working on. If people are not necessarily exec producing, or people are exec producing, but they're not, you know, what can people do to help to support your films?
Oh, well, if you can go to opsociety.org and take a look at what we're doing. Maybe, I don't know if I could do it here. I could post a couple of films, if, you know, give people links to the films if they want to see them.
Yeah, they were definitely, all the trailers were sent out in the invite, and we will also put the trailer links in the recording that goes out as well for this. But I can, are you adding them right now to the chat?
Yeah, I think I can do that. I could give them some free links to look at. I might get in trouble with it, but it's all right. Let's see, how do I do this? Maybe I'll have to do it after. I'm at a different, I only got 3 little boxes here. I can't see the chat. what I'm at. I tell it afterwards. I'll post it. I'll give it to you, Amanda. Can I do that? And people can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, see the films. I think that, you know, it's a little bit of like, you know, dancing about architecture to listen to somebody talk about films. You know, see the films and know what I'm talking about, or, you know, just you know, if people want to change the world, you know, my strongest advice is, you know, start eating more plant-based. You'll start feeling healthier. You'll have more energy. You know, and when I talk about plant-based diet, I'm talking about a whole foods plant-based diet. You know, Oreos and Coca-Cola are you know, are vegan, but they're not healthy. So a whole foods plant-based diet gets you on the path to, you know, personal health. And once you start taking care of yourself better, it's easier to take care of other people. I don't know, just I really go back to what Bill was saying, that it's like, you know, once you start worrying more about other people, it feeds you. And I'm worrying, that's not the right word, but you know, caring for other people and being more compassionate and trying to relieve other people or other beings suffering is, I think, what we're made on the planet to do. That's sort of the highest. You know, we think about the people that we regard, the first responders, you know, the doctors, the teachers, you know, the philanthropists, the people that are out there doing this frontline work, are the people we look up to. We want to emulate. We want to be like that. And everybody is a frontline worker in, you know, with whoever they meet. Every interaction that you have another opportunity to be a better version of yourself by listening, and to be, you know, put yourself in their shoes.
Great. Well, thank you again. And we will send out the links. The movies that we're talking about in terms of the trailers are The Cove, Cove, Racing, Extinction, and his latest film, which is The Game Changers. And I thought it was just so interesting actually hearing you talk instead of playing the trailers themselves. But, you know, we'll definitely get the links out to everybody so they can watch those. And then I guess Leuser, thefilm.com, right, is the last one.
Right.
Available. Yeah, those are the four. We'll send those out to everybody. And just want to thank you again for your time. I know you're a busy person working in many projects. So thank you, Louie, for your time today.
You're welcome.
We'll have this recording up on the ACTAI.global website soon. And our next fireside chat is in 2 weeks, Wednesday, July 22nd, with Chris Fabian. Chris Fabian leads the UNICEF Ventures, which invests in open source technology for the public good. His team focuses on investments that address climate change, job loss, human population movements, pandemics, and other global risks. So I think it will dovetail well on a lot of the themes that we discussed today. And so with that, just want to make sure everyone is staying home and staying healthy and staying inspired. And thank you for your time. And we look forward to joining you in 2 weeks.
Great. And Amanda, I just sent you those links too. So you have
great.
those.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Louie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you.